Howdy, Immortallium here, and welcome to Cultured Immortallium. And I was asking a friend of mine, what kind of content should I be producing for this channel? Just since this is a brand new channel, what kind of stuff should I be covering? And she made a very good point, a very good idea. She mentioned, legal ways to access this media, which makes perfect sense because, obviously a lot of this media is very heavily associated with piracy and it can be very tricky to get your hands on them legally. And since, that's something that I kind of want to do as part of this channel, in terms of bolstering these industries, encouraging more diversity in types of content that's produced in them, etc., I thought that makes perfect sense. One thing that is worth mentioning, actually, I guess two things technically. First thing I do want to emphasize is that this is going to be for English language specifically. It makes sense that I'd be covering, ways to access the stuff in terms of English. So if we're talking like, French, Spanish, German, etc., obviously Japanese, that would be a completely different field, then, this is the wrong place for you. But I do want to cover English language. And the second thing that I want to note is just simply that this isn't going to be an all-comprehensive video. This is more just kind of laying down the groundwork, just letting some people know how they can access this stuff legally, whether it be hentai manga or hentai anime. Because it can be very difficult these days. So I thought, give some of the basics. And of course, I would absolutely appreciate it if you folks, notice that I don't mention a particular distributor or, a storefront or something, leave it in the comments below because I greatly appreciate it. I'd love to come back someday and do a more comprehensive cover of this topic. So anyway, but that all being said and done, let's go over some of these distributors. Now, let's start off, of course, with hentai manga, because I feel like it's a little easier to get your hands on this stuff. Easier being a relative term, I should say. And, of course, the most obvious one to go for is, of course, Faku. So Faku is, I believe they describe themselves, or they have at least been described as the largest distributor of English language hentai manga in the world. If you start looking around for some of these titles, you're very likely to come across their name, and they release their products physically as well as digitally. They even on their website, they have a subscription service available, and they're one of the few companies here, at least, I'll mention one other when we get to it, that as far as I'm aware, distributes their stuff on Amazon, which is very impressive. So yeah, relatively easy to get your hands on that. Now, one thing that's worth noting is that they used to distribute hentai anime, but they don't anymore. That was a whole situation a few years ago. But if you want to get your hands on some physical hentai releases, manga-wise, as well as digital releases, maybe subscribe to a, hentai manga subscription service, Faku seems like a good choice. Next up, I want to mention a company that I've worked with a little bit recently called Iridori Comics. Iridori Comics, specifically, they are a company that distributes doujinshi mainly, which, for those of you who are unaware, doujinshi is more kind of fan-made, amateur kind of production stuff. It isn't stuff that's, typically released in like a magazine officially. It's usually stuff that's sold, like at Comiket and all that kind of stuff. They've been sending me some stuff to cover, and I have been having a good time for the most part covering their stuff. Obviously, there's a couple of exceptions to that, but, I digress. The main thing to note about them is that they pretty much all of their distribution is digital. Now, there is, some physical releases, but I'll get onto that in a moment. They're mainly a digital company. So typically, you're going to have to go to their website, purchase the manga through there, and you're going to be able to, read it in like an e-reader format. Because they're doujinshi as well, it's worth noting that the price tags can be a little bit higher than, some manga releases. They do, actually, to be fair, sell some of their doujinshi each month for 99 cents, which I think is, very good value. So it is worth checking that out. They also do some physical releases. Now, they haven't done a ton of physical releases, but they have done a few. Something that breaks my soul a bit is the fact that they had, at one point, Imaizumi, like they had a volume of that, like in the flesh, physical, and it's out of print now, which breaks my heart. It's worth noting that. So, if you want to, check out some doujinshi, mainly digital stuff, but also they've got some physical releases, go ahead and check out Iridori Comics. Now, perhaps the next most noteworthy one is a company called J18. So, J18 is a company that is part of J-List. If you're not aware of, they're like a storefront, essentially. And J18 is a company that distributes hentai manga in English, digitally and physically. They've got quite a few remarkable titles out. I've taken a look at a couple of their physical releases, and they've, released some pretty notable physical titles. So they're definitely worth pursuing if you're interested in like developing a physical hentai manga collection. Something else that's really worth noting, and I think, everyone can appreciate this, they run a service called Dojin.io, and you can actually read doujinshi on there for free, which is pretty awesome. I do believe that they encourage you, to purchase the doujinshi if you enjoy it, but you can read it for free, which is fantastic. Why wouldn't you use that? I've come across some interesting stuff on there. The highlight, so far at least, has been a hentai doujinshi of Dark Souls 3 specifically, and it was actually pretty good. It was pretty good, so I'd recommend it. For these other publishers, there's going to be a couple of notes about them. So next up is Project H. And in the past, like back in the day when I was first making, my manga videos, Project H was the only company that I was really aware of that was releasing hentai manga in English. They are an imprint of digital manga publishing. They still have plenty of their titles available, but I'm a little unsure what they are these days. Like, I took a look at their social media. The last announcement they had for a new release was back in like 2024. I don't know if they still reprint any of their stuff. I have no idea. Digital manga publishing as a whole has been kind of in a very iffy state for the past 10 years or so. And this comes from someone who bought a lot of their Osamu Tezuka titles. I'm a bit unsure about that, but if you see any mention of Project H, it's worth taking a look at. They used to distribute their stuff on Amazon. I don't know if any of their stuff is actually still available on Amazon, but you can still go to their website and you can still, order some of their books physically, as well as, purchase a couple of their books digitally as well. So, worth checking out at least. Coolmic is also a very interesting distributor. They are a digital distributor of hentai manga, and it's worth noting actually that I interviewed them recently, got a lot of great information from them. It's particularly noteworthy that they have a very large selection of BL hentai manga specifically. And this is very noteworthy because over half of their audience is female, and obviously, a lot of the appeal of that is, of course, these BL titles. So BL, of course, meaning in this case boy love, man-on-man love. Now, there is plenty of, straight hentai manga on there as well. There's a variety of titles on there, but the BL titles are perhaps the most noteworthy of them. It is worth noting that they do have this kind of unusual purchasing option. It's not even an option, it's mandatory. Basically, they use a ticket system. So you have to pay for tickets essentially, or earn tickets, and then you can use these tickets to purchase the manga. And it's a little bit strange. They did explain to me some of the reasoning for it, and it made sense. But still, I think it is worth noting that might be a little bit strange. But still, they've got a lot of titles on there, and if you're interested at all, you should definitely go check it out and see what they're releasing. Maybe you'll find something that really interests you. Now, there's a couple of other ones. So Manga Plaza is another one that I've heard about. Honestly, I tried to look into them and I wasn't able to get that far. I do know they produce, apparently, from what I've read, some original hentai. So, that in and of itself makes it worth checking out. Beyond that, I don't really know that much. I think I read that they have some kind of weird economic strategy to do with subscriptions and having to buy manga generally as well, or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. I think they also do the standard digital thing where it's the first chapter is free as well. So, it's worth checking out at least. And the last thing I want to mention is DL Site. Now, DL Site is a Japanese website. They distribute a very large amount of media, very kind of otaku related stuff, as well as, some of the naughtier stuff. I did actually check their hentai manga section, and they do have some titles available in English. So, again, go check that out. Now, as far as I'm aware, they only distribute them digitally. So if you're looking to create a physical hentai manga collection, I'm sorry, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to help you with that, at least not in English, but, still worth checking out. And with that out of the way now, we're going to get onto the certainly shorter and more difficult area, which is something that I was thinking about recently. One of the reasons why I wanted to kind of establish this channel in the first place is hentai anime. So how do you legally consume hentai anime? And the options aren't really that varied, to be honest. So that's quite problematic. So first thing first, I'm going to mention Coolmic again. So Coolmic also distribute hentai anime digitally. For a very long time, as far as I'm aware, it was only their own stuff, adaptations of their own manga. But it looks like near the end of last year, I think, they started releasing some third-party hentai titles on there. Now, their prices vary quite dramatically. Again, you're going to have to take that with a pinch of salt, but if you want to, support the hentai anime industry and, go with digital titles, that's certainly a way you can go. Go to Coolmic, get some tickets, purchase some of those episodes, and, you'll be able to access them. Now, the next one is from the same company, actually. So Coolmic is owned by WWW, or actually, hang on now. What I meant was WW Wave Corporation. Basically 3 W's for that wave. They've set up a streaming service called Ocean Vale. And Ocean Vale is a service that I've had a couple of interviews about. I went over the site when it came out. It's currently in beta, and I say beta in quotes, because, you still got to pay a subscription. There's a bit of roughness to it, but they are doing their best at least to, make some improvements to the website. They've kind of developed a, somewhat respectable hentai library, got some pretty notable titles on there. It's still a little scarce, I would say, but they are technically in beta. So again, it is worth checking out. Particularly, actually, you can also set up a free account. Now, most of the content on there you can't access without subscribing, but you can at least access, some of their short form anime series, their you kind of censor versions so they don't have as much like sexual content in there, but you can at least go check it out. You can at least take a look at what's available on there. It's worth taking a look at the very least. And I'm really hoping that if Ocean Vale continue to make improvements, that eventually they're going to be a fantastic service and a great way to be able to access hentai anime. So those two have been to do with digital releases, and now we're going to be going on to physical releases. And specifically in the US, because as far as I can tell, I don't think for instance, UK, Ireland, did they release any hentai series? Maybe in Australia? I actually forgot to look into Australia. So actually, if you folks know of any Australian companies that distribute hentai anime, let me know. But I was specifically kind of looking at the US, and as far as I could tell, there's only really 2 at the moment, and even one's kind of in question. First up is, of course, the famous Kitty Media. Kitty Media is a home video distributor, a subdivision of Media Blasters. As far as I'm aware, they were owned for a while by Faku, but then they went back to Media Blasters, after that whole ordeal happened. And I took a look at their catalog. They got a pretty good catalog of older titles. I don't know if they've really released any kind of more recent titles, and those releases also are quite infrequent. So that is a bit of a shame. But hey, if you want to get some of these titles on Blu-ray, they're pretty much your only option, particularly in English. So I would say go ahead and check them out. I don't know if they actually release on Amazon any of their stuff. But you can definitely go to Media Blaster's website and just, go to the little section. You're going to have to say, oh, I'm 18 plus, of course. And then you'll be able to potentially order some of their Blu-rays. So definitely, consider that. And the last one I want to mention is one that I honestly had never heard of. And I'm not really sure if they're even still a thing. It's called Critical Mass Video. And I took a look at them. First off, I thought I heard that they were owned by Media Blasters, which seems redundant. Why have both Kitty Media and Critical Mass Video? I haven't seen any mention of them shutting down or anything. And I took a look at their release catalog, and as far as I can tell, the last title that they released was from 2022. So I don't know if they're still technically a company. Maybe they've been incorporated into Kitty Media. I have absolutely no idea. So again, if you folks know anything about Critical Mass Video, I would greatly appreciate it. I would like to know what exactly is happening with them at the moment. Have they become part of Kitty Media, etc., etc.? But as far as I can tell, those are your legal options for consuming hentai anime in English, and it's very minor. Ocean Vale is such a recent project. It's still in beta. Coolmic has only just recently started doing third-party titles, and Kitty Media and Critical Mass Video, I don't even know if they're still around, and Kitty Media, infrequent releases, don't really release any new stuff, any recent stuff, I should probably say. Their releases are infrequent as well, so, it's not a great state, and I think that's just a sign of, how much work has to be done in order to improve this industry, in order to create a larger market, to get better releases, get more companies interested in this content and wanting to release it. So yeah, hopefully this video has helped you folks today. It would be greatly appreciated if you'd let me know how much this has actually helped you. That would be really helpful in and of itself. Give me feedback. Also, let me know anything that you know to do with this topic. do you know of other companies? Do you know of other distributors? Do you know of other ways to get, hentai anime and manga legally? And of course, if you want to support the channel, you can access some of my affiliate links in the description below. I'll also be including a code from Iridori Comics. They very helpfully informed me, hey, linking directly to our website might not be a good idea on YouTube. So they decided to give me a code instead that you can use on their service. So definitely go ahead. When you do that, you're supporting the industry, of course, and you're also supporting this channel. So that would be massively, massively appreciated. Also, consider checking out some of my other content. I recently covered a bunch of the tags, hentai tags that I either like or dislike. That's a very long video, so definitely go check that out. And also, you can check out some of my reviews of some stuff. Recently, I've covered some doujin titles from Iridori Comics, so definitely go check those out. There's at least one good one in there and one that maybe isn't quite as good. So, of course, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated. And this has been Owen, also known as Immortallium, living the cultured life. I'll talk to you guys next time.